As a starter, my name is José Granha. I'm from Nokia, and I'm here to present to you how Gerrit connects with Nokia. Well, first we can start by a basic thing, which is what is Nokia? Nokia is a telecommunication company that has existed for quite some time and has reinvented itself from the beginning. So although everyone knows it as a telecommunication company, it had more humble beginnings, even starting by doing paper, toilet paper, and doing rubber boots, TVs, computers, and had also one thing that everyone that knows Nokia for, which is the mobiles. But nowadays, Nokia is more than just the mobiles, but it is a telecommunication company and produces the background of all telecommunication that we use. So instead of just selling mobiles, it sells the towers, it sells the communication means, and so forth. And to support all these reinventions, we have to thank our R&D teams that develop our products. And to support them, we use Gerrit. So a little bit about me. I'm a member of the Center of Excellence located in Lisbon to support that exists since 2019 to support our R&D infrastructure that we supply globally to Nokia. And I'm also the solution designer for that implementation within our ecosystem. Besides this, I also do the project management for the SCM architecture transformation and enhancement, meaning that all the new features that appear in Gerrit within Nokia come through our team, and we do the trials of all the changes that appear, and we put them on the line to our production environments. So regarding Gerrit, Gerrit has begun since 2015 with Alcatel-Lucent, and as Nokia has included a lot of other companies that merged together with Nokia, we've also picked up all the multiple components that were hosted. Some of them migrated towards Gerrit, others were just Gerrit installations that ended up being either consolidated or continue to exist as they are. Nokia is used exclusively within our network for our Nokia employees and for our suppliers. Working within our Nokia network, we support over 40,000 repositories and plus more than 50,000 users, constantly growing as our workforce also increases. And currently, we are supporting versions from versions 2.16.22 up to 3.2.7. Trying our best to get the latest and greatest features of Gerrit available for our community. Amongst our setup, we have one big setup made of one big server and 7 read-only replicas. And besides this, we also have 3 additional ones that support us. And all of them are bare metal servers for our production environments. Now, some statistics. Of course, I'm not going to go too deep into this since it's a little bit, in some cases, a little bit redundant. But just as a measurement, we have basically on our biggest instance something like 200 million operations per month, which for some may be a lot or less. 13,000 users, more than 13,000 users located over 120 cities. Besides this, we have approximately 4 teras of repositories added up all the environments that we host. So it's a little bit of a big thing to manage and also to upgrade. Okay, so basically how is our typical setup? Our typical setup, we have Gerrit at its front. We have some additional interactors, or biggest interactors with our setup, which are Zool for gating, for which Nokia has its own implementation, its own customization of Zool. We have Jira for ticket integration, and we have Jenkins for the CI pipelines, although it's not the only tool that we use, but it's the biggest tool that we use. Besides this, we have some monitoring tools, some open source, some closed source, and also some tools that we develop within Nokia for our own purposes. And aside from that, we also have some additional developments that we made such as for replication, for garbage collection, and for the self-service portal where users can interact with. Now, regarding the replication that we use has been developed some years ago. We started using it, especially at a time when Gerrit was not using the GitLab protocol v2. So we started already using and developing the repo, which I would assume it's very similar to the new pull plugin that is currently now, but we've been using it already for quite some years, and for now it has been working as intended. So I hope also for the community that if you have the chance also to try out the pull mechanism for replication, please try it out. Because on our side, when we used on our application, the improvements were were a lot better than what we got out of the push. Now, regarding our users, and who are the users that are using our system? So we have the interactive users, which are the day-to-day users that are on the system, that are somewhat mixed. So some of them use the SSH, some of them use the HTTP. There is no exact direction into it. And we also have the non-interactive ones, which are mostly CIs, that contact via the SSH channel. And that is basically our setup. Our self-service portal is where our users go to whenever they need to create a project or they need to create a group, so that they define and apply the correct patterns that we consider for the repositories, ensuring the correct the creation of template, ensuring the association of the users, and so forth. So there's a lot of work that is also on the self-service portal, just to ensure that the patterns are well established and that we don't get strange repositories appearing there with strange names that make no sense. Now, regarding our repositories, well, we have a little bit of everything. So we have a lot of repositories that have all the best patterns that could be possible. Smaller repos, small Git history, hierarchically managed, common rule accesses for the repositories. And of course, like all things, we also have the big ones with lots of changes, a very long history, a very big size, lots of refs, lots of objects, and fuzzy logic whenever we talk about submodules where we can get connections between multiple servers within the same server or with other servers or even with GitLab servers. Sometimes it happens. And we also have, of course, the prologue rules that no one likes them. And every time that everyone thinks about changing a certain rule, they all say, oh, who knows how to do this? Because no one knows how to do it. And then we have also the access rules where there are some small details regarding where the access rules are managed with regular expressions that sometimes cause more problems than they should. Now, from the implementation of what we do within our SCM team over the years, and especially over this year, there are a lot of activities that we do. So every time that there is a bug or a new feature in some of our custom implementation, then we have to go there and correct them or do the enhancements that our internal teams request. There are situations where we go for production and we try to troubleshoot whatever is happening there, trying to educate the users regarding how to use Gerrit, planning how we're going to improve our infrastructure, and planning also how we are going to improve our servers. And one additional activity that we also have is trying to promote the usage of replicas instead of using our master instance, which is also a big fight with a lot of them for all reasons and some more. And of course, the biggest and trickiest of all activities that come through our attentions is always the version upgrades. Now, why are version upgrades a problem? Well, the first problem that comes out of an upgrade is identifying exactly where we are and where do we want to go to. And that is sometimes a problem because, as all things and all companies, I think, the greatest and best is not always the best choice. Sometimes it's preferable just to go for the stable, for what has already been tested, where the community has the responses. And that means, of course, that we are not constantly changing from one version to another unless there is the justification for it. Meaning that sometimes we come to a version and we say, okay, this feature might be nice for us to put into. But then sometimes what is on the release plan and what is on the information from the community regarding that specific version, sometimes it just mentions what is there and that it is okay. But we have to dig out and search out for what is not there. What are the current bugs that are there that may impact our current use cases, and that is also somewhat of a problem, because in some cases we may come to a conclusion where there's a new version, but this new version has a fix that can be applied on our current setup. So if we are, for instance, at version 3.2.1, if there is a fix on version 3.2.2 that has exactly that one, for us it's a lot better to go towards the minor version than to go towards the bigger version, because there are more features that we want to do. And as most companies have, some of them have customizations. We also have. Fortunately for us, our customizations are somewhat benign within the Gerrit core. But we also have our plugins, meaning that if we have plugins that we have developed for our own solutions, which many times do not go towards going to the community because it's specific functionalities that we have that we see no value into putting it out for the community, then we have to do the upgrade of the framework, which sometimes means going for a different UI structure and framework that has, or some background services that are no longer going to be there for us to be able to connect. And that also means that we have to go through all our customizations, re-implement them into the newer version, put them on the line. And besides that, as Lucas mentioned, we also have the question regarding the plugins and seeing if the plugins that exist work properly with what we need, because we have a wide range of users with different types of usage of the plugins, and we have to check with them to see if they can work with what is there. And of course, not mentioning regarding the jumps that many times happen on the plugins themselves, that one moment they can be working, the other moment they may not be working, and that is always a problem. So if we are testing a little something and there is a plugin there, and we go there, we try it out and it works, then we can go over for the latest CI, you can pull it out and somehow there's a new bug, and then we have a new problem to go into and to look into. Now, of course, then comes all the automations. So how do we put out the version? So which versions are going to need to be needed for the jump from one side to the other? Doing the acceptance test of multiple users with different use cases. And one of our biggest problem that we have with such a wide range of teams working at us is engaging them and getting them to test out the version that we put into the UAT so that they can see that everything is working properly. And many times we come to the point where let's roll out this into production. And what happens if it does not work? Then we have to say, then tough luck, because we can't roll back. And sometimes that's one issue that for us would help us quite a lot in our enrollment and into getting the go-no-go for putting the versions. Is exactly that. Is once we put the version, it's that or nothing. And of course, many users just say, "Oh, in that case, I'm not sure what is and what isn't." And besides this, and besides all the testing, and even if we get the go-ahead for us to advance for the version, then comes the other question: is will it work on our current setup? Or do our servers have the capability of handling the new version? And that is why we also have one of the versions on the 2.16 is exactly that we came to the conclusion that we can put out the version, all the functionalities are there, but the hardware needs are more, and we can examine that there is a degradation on some of the operation that we do, and if we tell to to our business users saying that, well, we have a degradation of 15% on queries and 10% on clones. They will come to us and say, but we want our pipelines to work more quickly, not slower, just because we moved the version. And that is one of the tricky points, is exactly that. Is sometimes, although the improvements are there and we see the added value that those versions represent, when we come to this and we say, okay, now we need new hardware, or we need more virtual CPUs to put into this, or something like that, then comes the decision of, well, are we ready for this, or do we need to change everything so that we can have the new version? And sometimes that prevents us from going to the version that we want. And just as a note, usually for us to be able to do a rollout of a version, of a minor version, is something like less than a month, around 15 days. We can put out a version to production because there are basically little changes to be done. If we talk about a major version and putting that version into production, we may talk about a period of 2 to 3 months where everything is bubbling so that we can have a version into production. And this is likely something that also happens a lot.
Correctly that you mentioned you have from 2.16 to 3.2.
Mm-hmm.
And that means you manage number of server, Gerrit server with different versions, with different
Correct.
releases.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So what is the reasoning behind this? So why would we have a customer with many server, but running the same version and upgraded all on the time?
Yeah, and that was
synchronously.
the answer to you is that that was our plan, and we ended up hitting the performance wall.
Like his plan was to migrate from Subversion to Git.
Yeah, but on my case, it was just that the hardware could not match enough when we wanted to pass from the ReviewDB to the NoteDB. The performance degradation that we got was enough for us to get a break into the version.
Yeah, just one thing to mention. So the talk that I did this morning about the JGit improvements was really for filling up the gap that you saw. Basically, when you move from ReviewDB to NoteDB, then you see that you start with a kind of a penalty in performance. And of course, the business say, I don't know what is ReviewDB, I don't know what is NoteDB, I know that it's going slower, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I say, why are you doing a migration, making things worse? So I believe the JGit improvements that I was talking about, once they are merged, they will basically put this gap to a level that is negligible.
Yes.
In that way that you say, it's not going to be, let's say, worse than what it is before. And actually, some of the use cases are faster. Not all of them, but some of them. So they are equal or faster than before.
Then my hope is that once it is released and merged, that the next test that we will do on the performance will match that, and we will be able to advance for the version. Okay, continuing then. Now, one thing that we introduced into our setup was the use of replicas. So we have several of them that are geographically distributed to serve our users and our CIs, meaning that they generate less traffic on our network. As we are geographically distanced from each other, if we have one single point where they go for all the traffic, that just clogs up our network communications. And of course, we try to reduce, and I think that everyone tries to reduce that level of impact on their systems. And we do that also because in terms of the replicas, and we are talking about read-only replicas, we want to put there the operations that are related with read-only operations. As most of the traffic that exists, over 80% of the traffic that we have on our environment is basically clone and fetches. And over on our replicas, we have implemented the read-only plugin, which, thanks to that, provides the full UI access. So if anyone wants to log in and just take a look inside the UI to see what is a specific change, they can go there and they can see everything, and they can also query information, and they have it there and ready for use. The only thing that we did regarding that was regarding the read-only plugin. There was a small
question to this third bullet point. So you change read-only plugin, right? Because per default, it doesn't expose the UI on the replica.
Exactly. So we don't use the replica mode. We use a replica master with the read-only plugin.
But
Yeah, but in some cases, the other issue is that it also relates to a plugin, to a version of the plugin that is already end of life. Therefore,
just do it on master.
yeah, okay, we'll do so. And for instance, we have several patches that we also applied on some of the plugins. Most of them were to correct the issues that we found. Some of them were also derivatives of other versions that were where those patches were applied, and for our current version it was not, and we merged the specific changes, such as, for instance, on the Gerrit part, on our 2.16.22 version, we have the current version of the community. We have one patch that was applied for version 3.2 that we figured out it was useful to put on 2.16. 2.16.28 did not have it, so it was there. And we have some additional functionality that we tried out and was successful, but we decided not to pursue with it, so future versions will be more community-based. What is preventing us from picking up the replicas? Well, the first part, of course, is how do we convince them to use it? And that is something that demands a lot of going around, going through teams and saying, okay, please move to the replica. You're doing too much traffic on the master. Please move to the replica. And some of them have things already hard-coded, so that makes it even worse. So we can't go there and change. They have to go there to their pipelines and move. If we were to implement a solution like geo-redundancy, or where we would examine where the traffic is coming and we could redirect towards one of the replicas, that sometimes do not work because it depends on the type of activity. So if you're using SSH, we can't figure out exactly what operation they are doing. So if it's something like a push, then we have another issue, which is then you are going to a replica that does not do anything, and we cannot process that operation. It gives out an error. And besides that, we have also some issues regarding RCIs and gatings because they are depending on the stream event. Some of them depend on just having one server to do all the operations, both the read as well as the review, and that basically for those situations then we have another issue, which is they don't work. Now, that of course there is no problem without a solution, and we've tried out several of them. Okay, Luca?
One question from Matthias. He was saying, put a load balancer in front of master replica and let decide where to route the traffic. Have you considered that?
Yes, we have. So on the replica, well, we have already done some, again, on the HA, we can't because of the SSH. Everything that is SSH, we cannot. HTTP, we could. But since we have traffic and our traffic is basically balanced between the two, for everything that is HTTP, we can. For everything that is SSH, we can't. We could, of course, try to promote the usage of HTTP versus SSH, but that's another discussion. And if we have problems already going to the pipelines and getting them to change from one server to another, then changing a protocol from one side to the other, it's even messier. Okay, so ways to work around this. So one of them is basically if we have a main server and we have replicas and we want people to go to the replicas to clone, we can just block them. And for that, we developed a plugin, which we hope to release to the community, where we can specify with the users which ones are whitelisted and which ones are blacklisted. And we put out that, and no one can clone from those repositories. But of course, like all things, the biggest problem is never the solution, but getting the people to adopt it. So it's still under discussion to get that to work and to block.
So small question. So the blocking restriction plugin that you wrote and proxying capability plugin, have you extended the core for extension points, or the core was already fine for that and you was just able to write a plugin against existing core?
We wrote it against the existing core. Nevertheless, on the yes, it was just that it wasn't a module. It was just a plugin. So it was a normal plugin just to put. For the first one. For the first one. Okay, for the second one. So the second one that we went through was examining the possibilities of going to the replicas and executing and creating a new software that could just relay the change operations that happen on the system and relay them back towards the main. And we also did that. But there is since we have replicas located in different geographical locations, then it comes the question regarding how fast we have the changes that are on the replica for them to be able to work on. In the areas that have more latency, then the data is not fully synced. In and the rollout, then the escape scenario was if I can't hold it, then I have to put it on the master. So I'll redirect the action to the master, and he'll do it whatever the clone of the repository from the master instead of doing on the replica. That generates a big pile of problems that are difficult to solve.
Right. You can solve it on the client side and ask him to use for push different.
Yes, of course.
As for pull.
Yeah, I know. And just as a curiosity, we do have that. So on the self-service portal, there is a page there. Use the replica. So you put here, you select, tell me your project, tell me the replica, you have a list of replicas, select it. We have the git command, you copy it, you paste it on the, they don't use it. So it's not, again, it's not a problem of technique, it's a problem of usage. And the last part, and what we've been investing our work currently, is that we're currently working on a new plugin slash module. This one is really a module as the other one, that basically picks up the clone requests that are coming into the main server, and we just proxy it towards one replica. This replica is spawned in Kubernetes, where we can define what type of repositories we have there, and it just goes there and picks up. So instead of creating a big HA solution where we put everything there, we just pick up our master and our capabilities of the master, and we put in on specific replicas with specific repositories, and it goes there instead of going for the master. Of course, this is not like all things. It does not remove the effort of the master. So the master is still there. It's still holding the line open to communicate to the replica. Nevertheless, one of the biggest issues that we have on our servers is the I/O that we get and the operations that are currently running on CPU. So this would diminish a lot of the effort that we have, considering the 80% of the fetch clone that we have currently on our servers. And this is currently ongoing. Hopefully, by the end of the year, we'll have this working, at least up to the user acceptance test, and let's see from there how far it will go. If all goes well, we'll be releasing this also to the community. And now, some questions, which is a little bit theoretical, and that is one item that I would like to raise is, there are situations where we can have an HA solution as the basis for everything. But let's consider that we will go for a scenario where we do have an HA with a multi-site in some ways, and we continue to have more repositories and more users going there, making it bigger and worse at the same time. And we still want to maintain speed. Well, like all things, if we go for the multi-site, if we have a multi-site solution and everyone can commit to every location, from any location, then you need quorum. And if they are geographically separated, you have delays, you have more computational needs that go around, so you have to wait for the quorum to happen. Then you can open up your servers, you can start scaling horizontal and vertically, but there's a point where you can scale vertically and you cannot go any further because there's no more money. You can go for horizontal, but then you have I/O latency. And regarding the I/O latency, if we start having the big monorepos and things start moving slowly, then perhaps the file system may not be on par to be able to work with it. And there's another item here, which is that we may have a big instance where we have a lot of data, but we have 20,000 repositories. But our teams don't work with 20,000 repositories. They have a small set of repositories that they work with, 100, 200 repositories. Do we need to have one big machine just for 200 for this and 200 for that? Does it make sense for us to go there and to just bump up the cost of having bigger servers for them? Does this make sense? And then, of course, but we still want one big place where we have all the repositories for all purposes, for audit purposes, for reviewing purposes. We still want this one where everything can be accessed and seen in some way. And for that, well, what could be a solution? And one possible solution that we've put into our evaluation is a smaller divide and conquer approach. So instead of having one big master where everything is happening and working, we would just hold one small or smaller capacity server just to hold everything, and then provide for the smaller teams these small spawns where we would just put the repositories that they need and where they could work and completely independent from all the rest. This approach, of course, would have some advantages, which would be each team works with its own small box, no one to worry about, so they can do whatever they want over there. They could even connect their own small pieces for themselves, so they don't have that big dependency and then big infrastructure. And as the team appears and disappears, they can destroy and recreate on demand. If the team starts growing bigger and more needy of CPU capacity, they could just respawn it to have more virtual CPUs to work on. And if they went over there and they just kicked on the server and did a big nasty operation that killed the server, they would just kill their own server and not the servers of the other teams. But of course, like all things, if we were to go into this approach, then there would be some things to think about users and groups and how to manage them, on the change numbering, how do we apply a range of numbers for each one so that they would not hit each other when they did, and when we wanted to merge things, that the change numbers would still be there. And of course, the repos that are still used by multiple teams, how could we go there? And this could be one solution, one possible solution that I leave as food for thought.
I believe that my talk tomorrow is going to give you some hints there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there are some common, let's say, thinking about what we do in 3.7 and what we're thinking about to do also in 3.8. So your input could be really useful for the direction. Yeah,
then
or the design document.
I'll be available for that. So this could be one possible way. Of course, this would require some sort of replication that could work in this way. We would have to have the archival would also have to have some capabilities, and so that they could say, okay, these repositories belong to this one, and these do not. You only access it for read, and it would sync automatically between the locations.
So not using high availability or multi-site for specific reason. But what about failover if you have a hardware issue on the main machine?
Well, in that situation, what we have is a cold server that is available to replace the other one whenever we have that situation.
Okay, but how is they synchronized with the main one?
Well, we don't have, we are not using local storage, so we have network storage connected via fiber channel. We just move from one to the other and it's ready to go.
And you don't use high availability?
We don't use high availability, probably because of historical terms. So in a certain amount, some time ago, we did try to use the high availability, but due to the to the usage that we are using and the I/O that we have. Any type of usage of NFS had too much of a bad performance, and we ended up not adopting it.
So the question was, how do you synchronize? Do you put the indexes as well on the NetApp?
We put also the indexes on the NetApp.
That makes sense, yeah. Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.